Hello everyone and welcome to another Old World Almanac, Old World update, where we get a look at the rules for the shooting phase. I'm happy to report that a lot of things have stayed more or less the same as they were in the earlier editions of Warhammer Fantasy. One of my main concerns was that the shooting phase would take on a bit of an Age of Sigmar-esque look, where you had not a ballistic skill stat and you had to compare that with some modifiers to what you had to roll, but you would get a straight up 3+ or 4+ or whatever plus to hit. That fortunately is not the case. Ballistic skill is back, though with a slight twist. Let's take a look at the article, shall we? Here we have it, the Old World Almanac, Darken the Skies with Volleys of Arrows, Quarrels, Shot, Bolts, Balls and Screaming Skulls. If you have a title spanning over 4 lines, then I think you should have maybe revised your title a little bit. Although they are trying to be very inclusive here, but yeah, I guess there's still things to be left out. For example, magic spells is one of the things that you don't see mentioned here, and that's one of the things that you do in the shooting phase as well. So we open the article with this picture of the Wood Elf Glade Guards 6th edition box art. I believe it was already in 6th edition and stayed in 8th edition, the plastic Glade Guard / Scout kit. Then they continue to say that everything is divided up into 4 sub-phases, including the shooting phase. These 4 sub-phases are declare targets, roll to hit, roll to wound, and remove casualties. Now I think this is a bit of a stretch, because there's also armor save, as is mentioned below. I think they just tried to squeeze everything into 4 sub-phases just to make it more appealing, I guess, or more easy to remember. But yeah, there's I think the game is a little bit too complex to do that straight up. So you might get away with it with the start of turn and a movement phase, where there are certain sub phases that you skip. With this one, I think armor save should be its own sub phase, but well, who am I? Now in earlier editions, you would declare all of your targets before resolving the shots 1 unit at a time. That is because you could guess ranges. In this edition, guessing ranges is no longer part of the gameplay. I'm still a little bit sad about that. It's one of the things I liked about Warhammer, that you could guess your ranges and that you could miss, and that would actually require a bit of talent on the part of the players, other than just strategic prowess and being good at rolling dice, which is just a matter of luck unless you use weighted dice. This is leaving it a little bit more to the game and a little bit less to the player. So I guess for the people who are not good at guessing ranges, that might be a good thing. So let's just say that it's for them. You, in this version of the game in the old world, you do each of these 4 sub steps, each of these 4 sub phases for each unit in turn. So you pick your first unit, you declare, you roll to hit, to wound, remove casualties, and let's not forget the armor save, of course. And then you go on to the next unit. That means that you can have a unit of goblin archers shooting at a unit of, say, wood elves. The wood elves get wiped out, and then the next unit of goblin archers can shoot at a different unit. Whereas in 6th edition, for example, you would say these 2 units of goblins shoot at that unit of wood elves. So it will make your shooting phase a little bit more effective. Then we get 2 examples of ranged weapons, the longbow and the Screaming Skull catapult. The longbow is still a range of 30 inches and a strength of 3. It has 0 AP, AP standing for armor penetration, I believe it is, or armor piercing maybe. Basically it means that you don't take away the armor save, you don't take away anything from the armor save. It does have the special rule Armor Bane 1, which we don't get explained here, and Volley Fire, which is mentioned a little bit below. The Screaming Skull Catapult, it has a range of 12 to 60 inches. I believe that was also the case in most of the later editions. At least with the minimum range of 12 inches. That was not in 6th edition, but it was introduced in, I believe, 7th or 8th edition. It has a strength of 4 and 8 in brackets. I'm assuming that's the central hole there. And an AP of -1 and -3. Now, I'm not sure yet how this AP works, if this is something that stacks with the strength of the hit or if it is just in place of the strength of the hit. For example, in 6th edition you would have a strength 4 hit that would give you a -1 on your armor save. If you have a strength 8 hit, that would be a -5 on your armor save. I'm assuming that it won't stack because a -5 on your armor save is just as bad as a -8 on your armor save. Although that would mean that high strength hits, or at least in this case a high strength hit of 8, is taking away less armor than it did in earlier editions. This is a mechanic that has been around all the way from 2nd edition at least onward, maybe even in 1st edition. So it seems a bit sad to change it like that now, especially because high strength hits don't really appear all that often against things that are so heavily armored that they can take them. Now, this one has a whole heap of special rules. It has a special rule, Bombardment. If I would hazard a guess, I think that means that you can shoot at a target that is outside of the line of sight of the stone thrower itself, as long as it is inside of line of sight of one of your own units. There was a rule for that in 2nd and 3rd edition, where you could do something like that. It might even be called Bombardment in the same way, that you could shoot at a point that you could not see as the catapult crew, but if you did that, it would give you a higher chance of scattering. Cumbersome, that probably means that you can't move it very well, although I'm not sure because it also has the rule move or shoot, so might be that cumbersome means that you can't march with it. Might have been something like that in 8th edition as well, can't really remember. Flaming attacks, they still are a thing. Magical attacks are still a thing. Move or shoot, we mentioned. Multiple wounds, D3+1. I'm just assuming that is for each model that is wounded. Each wound counts as D3+1 wounds. So it has no effect against the single wound models. It only affects multi-wound models like trolls or characters. And it has a special rule, Screaming Skulls, which, if I'm anything to judge from all the earlier editions, means that a single kill from a Screaming Skull catapult causes a panic test and not the 25% that it is later, and that's also still in this edition. Yeah, it says here, the multiple wound D3+1 special rule applies only to the single model whose base lies underneath the central hole of the blast template. So it has a 3-inch blast template and it uses the stone thrower misfire table. We still don't get to see them in this article. So here's how it goes. You pick a unit, declare its target, pick a unit that's one of the units armed with missile weapons. The unit can shoot if it has a ranged weapon, hasn't marched or charged their turn, and isn't fleeing or in combat. That's still the same as what it was in earlier editions. You must have line of sight to the target, and you can't split fire. So that's it was maybe in later editions, but in earlier editions you could definitely split fire. That if some of your troops could not see one target, they could fire at another target. So in this case it just means that not all of your models can shoot. You can only shoot with the models in the first row unless they have volley fire or are stationed on a hill. So volley fire, that's one of the special rules we saw for the longbow. That means that they can shoot, I guess, in more than one rank, maybe just the second rank, or maybe they can shoot in more ranks than one, maybe all of them even. Or if they are on a hill. It used to be in 6th edition and 7th edition, and also believe earlier that the standing on a hill, the first 2 rows could shoot, and standing on level ground, only the front row was allowed to fire. And then in 8th edition they changed that the first 2 rows could fire regardless. Let's see, then you roll 2 hits. Then the big news, they say, what I already announced, old style ballistic skill is back. It runs from 1 to 10, and there is a slight caveat here, because it used to be that whatever your ballistic skill was and your 2 hits, if you added them up, they would amount to 7. So if you have your ballistic skill of 2, you need a 5 plus. 2 and 5 make 7. If you have a ballistic skill of 4, you need a 3 plus. 4 and 3 make 7. So going above 5, it used to be 6, 1, 7, 0, 8, minus 1, 9, minus 2, and 10, minus 3. And that is then modified by the modifiers, things like long range, single model, large target, stuff like that, cover. Now it is that if you have a ballistic skill of 6 or higher, you get a reroll should it fail to hit whilst shooting. So if you roll a 1 and if you miss, I guess, then you get to reroll with a ballistic skill of 6 and you need a 6. With a ballistic skill of 7 you need a 5, 8, 4, etc. So the first target number is the first roll, the second target number is for the reroll. Then you still have your modifiers. It's -1 to hit if you've moved, if you're at long range, receiving a charge, so that's the stand and shoot reaction, or if your target has partial cover, and a natural 1 always misses, while negative modifiers can stack past 6 plus, and you may find yourself having to roll a 7, 8, or 9, which is a natural 6 followed by another roll of 4, 5, or 6. That was introduced all the way back in 1st edition, and that has stayed around only for shooting in later editions, but I'm glad to see that they still have that mechanic there. Then they say we have more old school goodness in the next step, because we have the 2 wound chart. If you are familiar with the way the 2 wound chart has looked in the past, then you will notice that though it is very old school, it's also slightly modified. Used to be in, I believe 4th edition onwards, might even be earlier, that at least from 4th to 7th edition, that you would hit on a 4 plus if your strength equaled the toughness. That's still the case here. So for example, strength 4 against toughness 4 is a 4 plus. If your strength is 1 higher than the toughness, so strength 4, toughness 3 is a 3 plus. Is it 2 or more higher, it's a 2 plus, all the way back to 0. Well, toughness 1, because toughness 0 means that your miniature is dead. Going the other way, if you have a weapon's strength that is 1 lower than the target's toughness, so strength 4 against 5, that's a 5 plus. Strength 4 against 6 is a 6 plus, and then it used to be in all the earlier editions that you could have 2 6s here and that's it. So strength 4 you could hit a target with toughness 6 or 7, but not a target with toughness 8 or above. Now in this edition we don't get 2 6s in a row, but we get 4 6s in a row. Meaning that your strength 1 weapon can hit a target with a toughness of 6 but not 7. Or what's more common, a strength 3 weapon can wound, I said hit but I mean wound, wound a target with a toughness of 7 and 8 but not with 9 and 10. Used to be that you could only wound targets up to toughness 6 with your strength 3 weapon. So you couldn't use your strength 3 bows to shoot down a toughness 7 catapult. That has changed. There is still a slight corner here, a slight triangle, where it is impossible to hit very high toughness targets with very low strength weapons. But that is at least better, I think, than what it was in 8th edition, where your strength 1 snotling, well, maybe that's strength 2, but at least something that was very low strength could take out a toughness 10 monster if it just rolled enough 6s. Then it goes on to say that you get your saving throw. It wouldn't be Warhammer without your saving throw. This is a familiar process. Compare the armor penetration of the weapon with the armor value of the model it's hitting. Well, that's not really very familiar because armor penetration is a very new thing, or at least a new term. This used to be, I think, just incorporated in the strength, and now it is a separate value. So I guess maybe that some weapons with strength 4 have a higher armor penetration than other weapons with strength 4. Light armor gives a 6+ save, heavy armor 5+, which can be boosted with a shield, barded mount, and certain spells and magical items. But you can also have a ward save that cannot be modified by AP, and that's rolled as a separate save after the armor save roll has failed. I don't know why they say that there's a small difference, because that's, at least as far as I know, the way it's always been played. Then you remove casualties and take panic test where necessary. Now, it doesn't say here yet if this... Well, maybe it does, because this is one of the steps that you do. You do this per unit. So I guess you shoot, you remove the casualties, and take a panic test if you are over 1/4, if more than 1/4 of the models in the unit have been killed. And it used to be that these panic tests were taken at the end of the phase, but the way that this is written is that at least it implies that these panic tests are taken immediately. So going back to my fictive example of the goblins shooting at the elves, if the goblins don't manage to kill all the elves, but they do shoot down enough to cause a panic test, the elves panic, and then the next unit of goblins can shoot at a different unit of elves instead of having to shoot at the first unit, as was the case when you had to declare all of your targets before shooting with the first unit. Then we get some extra things here. There are plenty of weird and wonderful shooting units in Warhammer the Old World, a plethora of special rules to go with them. Big beasties have breath weapons, and I really hope that these are not a one-use only anymore as they were in 8th edition. That really took away the punch of the breath weapons, and I think a dragon should be able to fire his breath weapon every turn and not just once per game. Some skirmish cavalry can fire and flee, which is one of the charge reactions if I recall correctly. It's in with the Illyrial Reavers in 5th edition at least, might also be in later editions, where you, when you are attacked, you first shoot and then you you turn around and you flee, just like the rule suggests. So that's one of the charge reactions. Dwarf Iron Drakes have Cinder Blast bombs that can quick shot. This was also one of the rules in 8th edition. I don't really remember what it did. I don't believe I have ever played with any units that had them. But I believe it was something like you can move and shoot with them without a penalty. But what it does, wouldn't you like to know? Yeah, I guess we do. As for magic, there are two categories of spells that can be fired off in the shooting phase: magic missiles and magical vortexes. Now we get to another interesting tidbit here, and that is that human wizards using battle magic can, for instance, blast off a quick fireball. Now, note that it says here battle magic and not the lore of fire. This is, I think, a very good addition to the rules, because the colleges of magic have not been established in this day and age. They were only established by Teclis after the Great War against Chaos, which in the time the Old World takes place is something that is still to happen. You might recall that in 5th edition although there are rules for the different lores, you had the 4th edition, you had the battle magic box, which had the spells for all the 8 different lores of magic. In 5th edition, those were still in the book, but they didn't get any cards because the cards were replaced with battle magic. There was a deck of 20 cards with some duplicates, and well, Fireball was one of those spells. So I guess they go back to that setting again, where you have a generic set of battle magic spells, and that is used by most of the wizards that don't have their own lore. Now, Fireball we get here, it is a magic missile, it has a casting value of 8+. I commented on the casting value in an earlier article, earlier video. I think that works the same way as Mordheim. You roll 2d6 and you have to make that casting value. And if you don't make it, then there is no spell, and if you do make it, then there is no dispel, I guess. Range of 24 inches, I believe that's always been the case, and 2d6 strength 4 hits, I believe that's also always been the case. No armor penetration here, so I guess then your strength 4 hit doesn't really do anything, and you still get your full armor save against a fireball. It has the flaming attack special rule, which is quite obvious. And we get another one, that's the Vortex of Chaos. This one is in the subsection of Demonology. Seeing as how this is a Vortex of Chaos in the Demonology spell lore, I'm guessing that this is one of the lores that you could use as a Chaos player. That is to say, there is no Demons of Chaos in the core factions, but there is Warriors of Chaos, so I guess that this is one of the Warriors of Chaos spells that you can use. It has a range of 15 inches, again a casting value of 8+. It remains in play. You place a 3-inch blast template so that its central hole is within 15 inches of the caster. Whilst in play, the template is treated as dangerous terrain. It moves d6 inches in a random direction during every start of turn sub-phase. And any unit, friend or foe, the moving template touches or moves over gets d6 plus 1 strength 3 hits with no armor penetration. Very situational, I guess, because it's easy to avoid, especially if it moves only a few inches per turn. I guess it's mostly in the placement, and since this is you place it and you don't really do anything with it. You just it's not as if it creates a swat of damage between where it starts at the wizard and where it stops. That was the case for some vortex spells in 8th edition. But in this case, it's just you place it somewhere, and then anything that is touched by it that gets damage. D6 plus 1 strength 3 hits, not really anything to sneeze at, especially considering that the unit that you put this template on will be hit by it twice, both now and when the template moves in the next phase. And then again, maybe when they move out of the template in the movement phase. So yeah, that's looking at 3d6 plus 3 strength 3 hits that can cause some actual damage on a unit there. So yeah, that's the two spells that we get here. They haven't updated this bottom part yet. Next up, shooting phase. I guess next up will be combat. But for now, I guess this is going to be it for this article. Right, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this little preview of the rules. I gave you my thoughts during the discussion of this article, but I'm also curious about your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about this, if there anything that you expected to see but you didn't see, or is there anything that you did see that you were disappointed with or are really excited about. If you want to know more about Forces of Fantasy, you can reach me via different channels. You can listen to the podcast on all of your standard podcast hosting platforms. The Forces of Fantasy podcast, we take a look at all the different materials released for Warhammer Fantasy throughout the different ages and editions, and the Old World is also part of that. If you like the video, of course you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, but you can also, if you want more content like this, let me know by joining the Forces of Fantasy Patreon. The Forces of Fantasy Patreon is non-tiered, meaning that you can join for as little or as much each month as you like. On the Patreon, I will post exclusive bonus content and previews of upcoming videos and battle reports. And you can also vote on what kind of battle reports I'm going to do in the future. Of course, all depending on the time I have, as I also have a day job besides making these videos. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week with a new Old World update.